And good evening, good evening, good evening. Welcome to Monday, and welcome to a slightly unusual version of my writer stream because I'm going to be talking about my stuff. I'm actually celebrating today the launch of the final book in my Shadeward Saga. Which is my sort of, well, it is science fiction, and we'll come to that. But it's my own science fiction series, 4 books in length. The final version, the final book has literally just come out today in ebook form. It's been available in paperback for a few weeks, but the paperback is now out. So yes, shameless self-promotion day. So I said I'd do something about Shadeward. I'm going to indulge myself in my own stuff this evening, and I think if you're a writer, I think you're going to find it interesting anyway, because you can see a bit of my process in a bit more depth than perhaps you normally would, talking about my own thing. And I haven't really ever talked about Shadeward properly on a stream before, so I thought it might be fun to do it. Now, if nobody else agrees, then that's fair enough. But I'm hoping it will be entertaining. So there's quite a lot to talk about, and some of it's it's quite interesting stuff. So today is the day that the ebook launches. So I have. Well, I haven't done it. My publisher's done it, but pressed buttons and done stuff on Amazon. Everybody who pre-ordered the ebook has now got their copy. It will have magically appeared on their Kindles and all that kind of good stuff. So, that's all happening. But what I thought I'd do is go through and trying to keep it spoiler-free as possible, because I know there'll be a few people watching who certainly haven't read the 4th book and may not have read any of the others either. So I'll try and keep the spoilers to a minimum. There might be minor spoilers for the first book simply because of the way. I have to kind of set the scene, but the first book's been out for 5 years, so to be honest, what have you been doing? So that should be quite good fun. So anyway, who's on the stream? So Alan here, good to see you, Alan. Glenn is here, Chris Viking's here, Steve is here, awesome. So yes, Jason Bass is here. Hello, Jason. Good to see you as well. Thank you very much for popping in there. I appreciate that. So first things first. What is Shadeward? Well, Shadeward is my answer to, or my first attempt at an answer to, given carte blanche as a fan of science fiction. So I've grown up with, I was born in 1970, so I've grown up with Star Trek, the original series, which obviously was actually over before I was born, but it was on reruns all through my childhood. Kelly Baglar's here as well. Good to see you. So Star Trek, big influence, massive influence on me when I was very young. Mr. Spock in particular. Okay, so I love that whole thing, and I love the teamwork on of the Enterprise crew. That was always the bit that got me. Scotty with his engines, Spock with his analysis, Kirk as the leader, McCoy with his doctoring, and Sulu flew the ship and Chekhov fired the weapons, and Uhura did the communications. Everybody worked together. What a wonderful universe Star Trek is. Wouldn't it be nice if it was like that? And everything was clean and tidy in the Star Trek universe. The ship, even when it was damaged, it nothing blew up really, did it? It tilted a bit, and that was about all that went wrong. I don't even remember there many things blowing up on the Enterprise, the original, certainly on the original thing. So Star Trek, big influence. Star Wars came along in 1977, of course. So space, lasers, etc., etc. I've waxed lyrical about the computer games that influenced me as a child as well. So about Elite, about Lords of Midnight, about all of those Zap, Kapow, Splat, conquering, questing games. They're all big. They're all big things in my childhood, and there was Battlestar Galactica in there. What else was there? Buck Rogers in the 25th century. You had loads of other sort of B-type space movies and TV series. Space 1999, Blake 7 in the UK. Lots and lots of stuff, and we've talked about those. So it's fair to say I'm a big science fiction fan. I don't think that would come as any surprise to any of you. But and as a child, and thanks to the computer game Elite, and again I've said this before, but thanks to the computer game Elite, I started writing stories at about the age of 13. So yes, massively heavy sci-fi diet. Yes. I was amazed. Actually, the computer game Elite came with a book. Okay, well, it's a novella, it's a short book, but it's still a book, it's still a story, and it called The Dark Wheel. And I remember reading this thinking, this is really good. Yeah, I bought this computer game which allows me to fly around space and shoot things, which is great as a teenager. But there's a book that comes with it which has, boy meets girl under silvery moon, and then they go off and conquer the galaxy sort of stuff. So all of that, I was like, wait, what? You can write stories about space and get them published? This really? What a cool idea. I might try and do that. So down here, and I have shown this to a few of you before, I have a big folder, okay, and it's not really top secret, right? Okay, but this is, where is it? There we go, for the camera, Drew's original stories from the 1980s. And in here is stuff that I wrote, and I have the very first thing that I ever wrote, and that is it. It's written, it's written by hand, and it's preserved on note paper. As you can see, it's really, really, really old. And of course it's rubbish. Don't be under any illusions that it's not rubbish. All right, but I did actually read it not that long ago just to sort of see how bad it was, and it's appallingly bad. But I was only 13, so I mean, you've got to give me a break, okay? So, and it's a bit teenaged angst. It's a bit, young lad saves the day every single time. It's like Wesley Crusher, but 10 times worse, okay? So, but it exists, okay? This here is the first story I ever wrote, and I'm glad I've still got it because it shows me, shows me what's going on. Now, it's a total rip-off of Star Wars, Star Trek, and Elite, oddly enough. In fact, it goes so far as to actually pinch the ships and pinch the weapons and pinch all the nomenclature. So it's a sort of fan fiction crossover. Read it. Read some. It's awful. You don't want me to read this. This is to be buried. This is to be dug up in many thousands of years' time when I'm dead. And then people could go, yes, well, it's an amazing artifact. So yeah, so it's not good, okay, but it exists. It exists, and I got, as you can see, my output was relatively prolific. I've got there's quite a lot of stuff that I managed to save from the ravages of time, and the only reason I keep it because it reminds me just to keep going. Reminds me to keep going. It's all there, safe and sound. So, but it's it's not good. It'd be highly embarrassing. But it just reminds me that I've been writing since 1983, since I was 13. So it goes back a long way. And there's and writers will understand this. There's something in you, and exactly what it is, I'm not entirely sure. But whatever it is, there's something in you that requires you to write, requires you to tell the story, requires you to get it down. I mean, even with a pen and paper as I used to, or then typewriters and then word processors and of course now computers, to tell a story. And I've, as I got older and learnt more and, hopefully got a little bit better at writing, my ability to tell a story got better as well. So I can do more complicated plots, I can do better characters, I can do better scenarios, I can invent my own stuff. And a lot of what went into Shadeward was my frustration with the sort of science fiction stories that we were being told. So I love Star Trek, but it's too utopian for me. I just don't believe that we'll ever get that good. And I like Star Wars for that reason, that everything is a bit busted and broken down and second hand, and but the problem with Star Wars is it's too fantastical, okay? So the science bit of my brain is going, no, that's just silly, I don't like, in my science fiction, in my perfect science fiction world, I don't like spaceships that fly like World War II fighter planes. That's not right. It's wrong. It's wrong. It's really importantly badly wrong. I can enjoy it, but I'm kind of looking at it going, but also some of the really cerebral science fiction shows. I'm thinking of things like 2001: A Space Odyssey. I really enjoyed the sort of Arthur C. Clarke heavy-duty science fiction and things like Asimov and those kind of things, but not very good at characters. It's like everybody in any Arthur C. Clarke story is just a professional scientist doing a job, and you really don't care about them. The only things interesting in the Arthur C. Clarke books are the scientific discoveries and the descriptions of places and things that go on. Most of his characters are very, very flat. Okay, The Martian is a really good one. I like The Martian because it's pretty realistic. I mean, it's not perfect because drama, but you've got to make allowances. So all of these things have been brewing around in my kind of. I like realistic science fiction. I like good characters. You know, one of the reasons I love, I like Star Wars and things like that is the characters are good, and Star Trek's got some very good characters as well. And in the world of literature, Arthur C. Clarke and Heinlein and Asimov had fantastic set pieces, but the characters were rubbish, in my humble opinion. But there were bright lights of characterization in the science fiction. I came across, and I owe a great big thank you to my uncle Jim, who he's still alive. He's pretty old now, but he gave me a book called Dragonflight and said, "I think you'll probably enjoy this." And it was by a lady called Anne McCaffrey. And I read this, and it seemed to be a fantasy story to start with because it had dragons and old-fashioned things. And then as you get into the story, you realise actually it's a science fiction story because the dragons are genetically engineered and they have weird and wacky powers, but they have a basis in understanding, and the planet turns out to have been settled from space as a kind of an abandoned colony. And I thought, these are great ideas. Okay, so all that sort of stuff has been percolating in my mind for many years, and so in about 2010, I finally sat down and thought, I'm going to write a science fiction series, because I've been dabbling with a bit of fan fiction and various other bits and pieces. And I've written one book which was a bit cathartic for me, trying to explore religion and science. And I wanted to write science fiction because that's always where my first love was, but I didn't want to write a Star Wars or a Star Trek. I didn't want to write a formulaic type story. I wanted to do something a little bit different. So that's something that thing. But I did want to have characters in it that people could relate to and kind of do stuff with. So those are the sort of things that were bubbling around in my mind. So back in 2010, I started scribbling, and I've still got my scribbles. And I always have a book. I find an actual book quite helpful. So in here, I think I've showed this to you a few times on screen before, but I started, where are they? I started writing down notes. So you can see some of them here. I started scribbling maps of places and making notes. And this one's dated August the 11th, 2010. So just sort of ideas. And this one actually had various other bits and pieces. Then I started drawing. I like drawing maps, as you've probably discovered. So a few of the names on these early maps have actually, you can see there's inspiration from things like Lords of Midnight. For example, up here I've got the Icy Wastes, which is a Lords of Midnight thing. The Desert of Karun is something that actually still exists in the Shadeward Universe. So that's quite good. On this map you can see, for those of you familiar with the geography of Shadeward, you can see Drem is a place that exists. You can see the Isle of Amar there, and you can see this area here is called Scalia over here. Whilst the geography hasn't stayed the same, some of the names did survive, and that's basically where I started. And then I started playing around, thinking, well, it's just another fantasy sort of story. It's not quite satisfying enough. What can I do to make that kind of better? So that's when I started, my astronomy brain go, well, it's science fiction. Let's go somewhere else. What about all the fantastic worlds that are out there? Now, you've seen them on Star Trek, and you see them on Star Wars, and you've got the ubiquitous lava planet, or the swamp planet, or the or the really thick atmosphere polystyrene rocks planet. All those sort of places. And I didn't want to do that because a planet isn't a single environment. You don't just have the planet of the lava. You don't have the planet of the swamp. It's not how planets work. Planets are very diverse environments. And so I started looking through, and Jason, who's actually on the chat somewhere, Jason the Base, he's a fellow astronomer, and at about the time back in 2010, exoplanets were big news. I mean, they still are, but they were big news at the time because we were discovering a whole bunch of them, and the properties of exoplanets were beginning to be worked out. Okay, and we realised that they weren't all like the Earth. And one of the things that really jumped out about a decade ago was that the vast majority of the stars in our galaxy, I mean, we know there's about 400 billion-ish, plus or minus millions, but the vast majority of them are red dwarfs, and red dwarfs are nothing like our star at all. Okay, we always call our star an average star, but it isn't at all average. It's nowhere near average. It's very, very unusual in many, many ways. So we talk about it as being, our sun is an average sun, but it's not actually. Ours is way hotter and way bigger than the average. It's also on its own, which is quite rare as well. There's certainly a higher percentage of double stars in the galaxy than there are single ones, things like that, which actually make our star quite unusual. And the fact that we've got a planet that we live on, it's at the right distance and is extremely convenient for us to be living here, and that's the reason we're here. But are there other places where life can exist? This is one question I do want answered before I snuff it on this Earth. Is there life somewhere else? Okay. But looking out there, red dwarfs are very, very common stars, and there's loads of them not very far away from our solar system. And so if I was thinking, well, in my science fiction series, I don't want hyperspace, because I don't, maybe we'll invent a warp drive or hyperspace system in the future, but it seems unlikely in the foreseeable, okay, because we haven't got the physics for it. So if there's going to be anything going on, it has to be not far away from here, okay? It can only be a few light years that we could feasibly reach with technology that's not too dissimilar or not too far away. So my science fiction was going to be realistic in the terms of what was capable and what wasn't capable, okay? If we were going to go to another star system, it would take us a while to get there, and it wouldn't be very, very far away. So that enabled me to very quickly work out where could we go for this story. And so at this point, I'm going to swap into one of the tools I use to sort of inform my research. Some of you will know this because I've shown it before, but this is Space Engine. Which is I don't know what it is really. It's not quite a simulator, it's not quite a game, and it's not quite a thing, but it's extremely useful just for tooling around the universe, looking at stuff. And it's a brilliant research tool for anything science fiction-y, okay? So the nice thing is we can go to, and let's just go here for the start, we can go to Earth, okay? So let's go to the Earth. And this is our sun. Here we are. Dun dun dun. And we can look up what's in the solar system, and surprise, surprise, the third planet is the Earth. So let's go to the Earth, okay? And that gives us, it's nicely done. It's all super duper vector graphics and blah, 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 all those kind of brilliant things, very, very high resolution. And looks good. Now, this is apparently we are a temperate marine terror with life, which of course we know because we live here. And there is the Earth and the Moon, and boom, we have, as the graphics take a moment to load, and you can see it's a very, very good simulation, because if I roll it round, well, the UK is in darkness, which isn't right, so something's slightly wrong with the timing there. I think that's Italy. Yeah, it is though. So the UK is at the Terminator, which is perhaps a little bit too early at the moment, but I may have my timings wrong. But it's the Earth, okay? It's the Earth. It's an Earth-like world. There we go. And we can go effectively. You can go visit anywhere in the universe, but I didn't want a warp drive. I didn't want a hyperspace drive, so we have to be somewhere nearby. So I'm just trying to remember how I do this now. That's the orbits. Where's the sort of long-range scanny thing gone? There it is. Right. Okay. So this is the Earth orbit. And if I zoom out, we can see. I think that's the Moon there. Actually, sorry, that's our orbit. And then we can zoom out a little bit. We can see the orbit of the Moon. We can see Earth's orbit, and we can see the solar system. And if we zoom out further, we can see the entire solar system. But it takes us quite a long time to zoom out before we get to, and it's quite a long way. It shows you the scale of space. It's just mind-numbingly enormous. But eventually we get to the nearby stars. And if we click on the nearby stars, we'll see things like Sirius, familiar stuff to us in the sky, Procyon there, and there's quite a lot of other little faint ones there. There's a red dwarf. Boom, there's the first one. Oh, and look, there's a red dwarf. And oh, look, there's a red dwarf. And oh, look at there, there's a red dwarf. They're everywhere, okay? within point blank range of Earth. So if we ever decide to send ships out into the darkness, these are the places where we could feasibly get to without technologies which are completely unimaginable to us today. Okay, so we're talking about fusion powered rockets of some description. All those sort of things would allow us to accelerate to a reasonable fraction of the speed of light, flip our ships over, and then decelerate. But it would still be an undertaking of decades or maybe even centuries. Okay, it's not like we'll just hop there tomorrow, see what it's like. Okay, so this was what was beginning to inform the background of the Shadeward Saga. Is if we're going to go somewhere, it can't be too far away. And what choice do we have? Okay, what choice do we have? Sirius, way too hot. Okay, very unlikely we'd find any habitable stars around that. And these planets, the hotter the stars are, the shorter their lifespans. Okay, they don't last long enough, and you need time. Okay, for planets to form, to become stable, to have oceans and therefore life stars and all that sort of stuff. Blah 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 blah. Okay. There is an anthology out there, so yes, I can certainly recommend 9 Streams of Consciousness. Thank you, Daddy Hoggy. Excellent time to do a plug for another series that I have been involved in, about what we do with generation ships and going those sort of things. So that's all good stuff. Procyon again, too hot. What's this one over here? Altair, too hot. Okay, too hot and too short-lived. Feel free to plug away there, Glenn. Well done. 9 Streams of Consciousness is our science fiction anthology, which is Daddy Hoggy and many of the people on the stream tonight were contributors too. So that's very good as well. But I'm not talking about that tonight. We'll do another stream about 9 Streams at some point. This sphere that we can see is kind of what's in range. Okay, for a theoretical sublight generation type ship, and I'm sure most of you who are on here tonight will know what a generation ship is. Basically a self-contained large ship which can contain an Earth-like environment within it that will last long enough to get to these places, possibly having multiple generations of people aboard or some other technology like that. So how far can we go? Maybe so I set myself right, it's got to be within 20 light years. Okay, it's got to be within about 20 light years of Sol for it to be realistic. And so that's where I started with, and these are the places you can get to. Now most of these are no good. Okay, all the bright ones are useless. Okay, so anything bright and hot, no good, because they just burn out too fast. There will not be time for planets to form around those sort of things and for life to develop. There aren't many stars like our sun. There's Alpha Centauri, which is presumably one of the stars which quite we're around here. Where is Alpha Centauri? It must be one of these. It's not that one. Oh, there it is, Alpha Centauri. There we go. So that one we know is there's actually 3 actually, but there's 2 stars like ours, and there's also a red dwarf in that system as well. So it's actually a 3-star system. Now, having 3 stars in the system may not, or maybe we don't really know at this point in time, good for planets to form. But I kind of assume that maybe Alpha Centauri wasn't a good place. We want somewhere with maybe single stars. Okay. That doesn't leave us with much, but what it does leave us is, as you can see, a smattering of red dwarfs all over the place. And I began to think to myself, well, if these red dwarfs are all within easy reach, can anything live in? Is it possible to live in a red dwarf system? And the answer to that is a very large maybe. However, if you can have an Earth-like planet, and so I've stuck with Earth-like planets because I wanted my characters to be very similar to us. Okay, very minor changes, so that they would be people who we would recognise as human beings. They might be slightly different, and in fact they are, which gets explained in the stories. But from a storytelling perspective, I didn't have to worry about extra arms or 6 legs or anything strange like that. They were just humans, okay, maybe slightly adapted to the planet they were on, but recognisably human. I didn't want to have aliens. I didn't want to have to explain that. I might do that in another series, but for this series, they were humans in a different place. That's one of the things I wanted to do. And so the question as to whether you can have life on a planet in a red dwarf system is one that I posed myself, and I started doing some research, and I was very lucky to meet a chap by the name of David Stevenson, who's actually a master of these things. Literally, he has not only just written the book; he's actually written the book about the habitability of red dwarf systems. And I can thoroughly recommend his book. Let me go and just find it for you here on Amazon. I think it's Stevenson. Maybe not. Let me just get that right. Life Under a Crimson. I think it's Sun. So this book here, okay? So Life Under a Crimson Sun. The prospects of life in a red dwarf system, okay? He wrote this back in 2013. So this is how long it took me to kind of get this far. And this became my Bible, okay? This became my Bible because in here is not only the possibilities, but the actual proper science that's been done. Okay, observations, calculations, simulations, okay, lots and lots of stuff. And I got in contact with him saying, look, I'm working on a science fiction series, but I want to know, is it possible for humans to evolve on a planet around a red dwarf star? And he said, almost certainly not. And I went, damn, why not? And we had a long email conversation. And he says, because there's all sorts of problems with evolution. He says, and I said, okay, well, let's play it around in the way. Could we colonize a planet around a red dwarf star? Could it be made stable enough for us to live on? He said, well, you've got lots of problems. I'm like, okay, talk to me. So we went through this. Lots of problems. The first one is a big one, okay? Where are we? Let's show you with images. Let's get this up for a moment. I'm just going to shut Space Engine down because it's tootling away in the background, making noise. And the first one is this one, okay? Any planet in a red dwarf system, okay? Any planet in a red dwarf system has to be really close to the star. Red dwarf stars are very small, okay? Their mass might be 0.2, 0.3 of the sun, okay? And that means that they don't have the gravity to hold all their matter in at such a pressure that they fuse in the same way the sun does. They're really slow burners, basically, and they don't put out much heat output. Maybe just 1% or 2% of the amount of radiation that the sun puts out. They're really, really, really dim, okay, by comparison to the sun. Now that means that in order to have enough energy on the surface to keep water liquid, so let's assume a world with liquid water on the surface, which is obviously quite convenient for storytelling and having people living on it. If you want to do sort of traditional style environments, at least with a twist, the planet has to be in a really, really, really close orbit. And by a close orbit, I mean seriously close, okay? So you think Earth is 93 million miles away from the sun. Okay, Venus, second planet out, is about 65 million miles out. Mercury is about 30 something, I can't remember, 35, maybe like that. Okay, and Mercury goes around the sun pretty quickly, but that's nothing compared to a red dwarf system. In order to have an Earth-like world with enough heat on it to keep it liquid, seriously close. Okay, seriously. So stop calling me Shelley. Okay. You have to have it so close that it orbits the star in about 8 days, okay, of our time, 24 hours, on the Earth. So that, 6 to 10 days is the length of the year, all right? Now that introduces, so that's possible, okay? You can put a planet in that close an orbit, and some of them have been detected, so they do actually really exist. You have to put the planet really, really close, okay? And it has to be in a seriously close orbit with the star really big in the sky. Not like the little disk we have at the sun. The star would be a massive, massive feature in the sky because it's that close to stay warm enough. Okay, but you have another problem. Is if you look at the moon from the Earth, you'll notice that the same face of the moon is always pointing towards us, and that's because the moon has become what's called tidally locked. As a small object rotates around a bigger one, the bigger one exerts a gravitational pull on the leading and following sides, and that acts as a brake on its rotation until its rotational period matches the orbital period. And the upshot of that is that the same face on the minor object is pointing towards the larger object at all times. And that's what happens to even an Earth-like planet in orbit around a red dwarf at this range. So you end up with a planet where one side is facing the star forever and one side is facing away forever. And the sun, or the star in this case, is stuck in the same location in the sky. Okay, so you get very, very weird weather, and that's what this image. This is a CGI image, of course, but this is sort of what this world would look like. Okay, so here, on the pole underneath the star is a sort of raging hot point. Okay, so it's really, really, really hot there, and then it gets more and more temperate as you get towards the edge, until you get to the sort of terminator when the sunlight fades and there's no heat. Okay, and because the planet isn't rotating relative to its orientation, there's very little heat. So the far side, which is always dark, receives no heat at all directly from the star. The only heating it gets is from convection of the atmosphere. And lots of models of the atmosphere have been done to try and figure out what it would look like. And they came up with this concept here, which is called an eyeball Earth, an eyeball planet, where it looks like an eye. And underneath this, underneath where the star is shining bright, you get this massive central tornado stroke hurricane thing. And then there's a temperate band around it. And at the end, you get these frozen kind of glaciers of everlasting ice that sort of surround the edge of the world. And it's a tidally locked planet. Even if it is Earth-like, it's not Earth-like in the sense that it doesn't have the same zones that we experience on Earth, and it's a very, very different place to do. So that was the first one. He said you've got some problems there, but he said I have worked it out. Life would potentially be possible in the temperate zones, and you might be able to travel into the other zones, with protection, against raging wind and freezing cold. And he said, but there'd be all sorts of other problems that we'd have to work out whether or not the winds and the surface and all those sort of things were actually, stable enough to allow, life to kind of even evolve there at all. So those are the sort of things that we were considering at this point in time. This image here is kind of a heat map. It's very simple, but this sort of shows you the amount of radiation that the surface of the planet is getting in that thing. So you can imagine lots and lots of heat. Now, if there's an ocean underneath that hot spot, you're going to get ferocious evaporation, which is going to feed massive Hadley cells of circulation across the planet. The weather conditions there are going to be interesting to say the least. Okay, but some of the computer models said it would settle down and become quite stable, although there would be this central hurricane over that what we began to call the substellar pole. So that's this. This started becoming interesting. So I thought, okay, well that sounds quite cool. He says, any other problems? He says, oh yeah, there's loads more problems. Okay, what else is there? He said, well, you've got deadly radiation. Ah, that doesn't sound good. Deadly radiation. Okay, so he says the problem is if you've got a star that close. So green is livable. Green is the temperate zone. Yes, green is the area whereby that's where you would probably want to camp if you were on on an eyeball Earth. Yes, that's right, Tyrone. That's about right. But the second. Okay, so that's the first problem, is that the weather might be weird, but it might be survivable. So the second problem is radiation. Okay, you're at point blank range to a star. Okay, consider your planet is in an orbit that only takes 8 days to go around the star. You're at point blank range. Now there is some good news. Red dwarfs don't give off nearly as much harmful radiation as our sun. Our sun is actually, if you go above the atmosphere and above the magnetic field of the Earth, the sun is chucking out all sorts of nasty stuff. Gamma rays, X-rays, you name it. It's all coming out of the sun, and it's not good news for life forms such as us. Now, red dwarfs aren't so bad in this regard, actually. The radiation, the vast majority of their radiation is coming out as infrared, which we experience as heat. But there is also some visible light. But most of the harsh stuff isn't there. Apart from most red dwarf stars are also flare stars. And every so often, they will chuck out, and for reasons that aren't entirely understood, they will chuck out massive bursts of heat, light, ultraviolet and X radiation in short 10 to 15 minute bursts. And nobody's quite sure why they do it. Not all of them do it, but quite a lot of them do it, because we can measure those things from Earth, and we've got these. So you've got the danger is that red dwarfs can pump this stuff out really, really badly, but for very short periods of time. But that's not good news, okay? Because if you as a prototype life form get hit by X-ray or even high energy ultraviolet radiation, it will strip your DNA. Okay, it's not good for you at all. It will kill you fairly effectively, and it will certainly prevent life from forming potentially in the first place, unless there's something that's stopping that. The other problem with this is that you're at point blank range to a star, and this is not necessarily a good place to be. The solar wind, the atmosphere of the sun that is constantly streaming away, because you're in that proximity, is much, much, much more powerful than what Earth experiences. And so in order to defend the atmosphere of the planet from the solar wind of a red dwarf, you'd need to have either a very thick atmosphere that was constantly being replenished by something, or you'd need a really, really strong magnetic field to prevent it getting hit. Okay. Now the problem with having a really strong magnetic field is it needs a rotating core for the planet. And the problem with tidal locking that we've already talked about is that the rotating core tends to quickly get slowed down by the process of tidal locking, which means that the chance of finding a planet with a good, strong magnetic field are not so good. Okay, so it's quite likely that most Earth-like planets in proximity to red dwarfs have in fact been stripped of their atmospheres over time, and darn, okay. Can't live on a planet that doesn't have any atmosphere, and no atmosphere is bad for telling stories in both a literal and a metaphorical sense. Okay, so those are the sort of problems. Okay, those are the sort of problems. Let's go on that one. So those are the sort of things I was wrestling with. But I said, okay, well, if I can invent a way for the atmosphere to be protected, and I can make an assumption that there's a mechanism for surviving these flare bursts. Okay. And if I could, if I can manage that, is there a 1 in 100 chance that a planet like this could exist and have life on it? And David basically said no. I said, okay, is there a 1 in 1,000 chance? And he went, yeah, I'll give you a 1 in 1,000. I said, that's good enough. That's good enough. This is the one. And so from there, I concocted the background to the Shadeward Saga. So it's based in real science. Okay, it's like any science fiction, it is extended and lots of assumptions have been made, and lots of really, 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 really good consistence, good coincidences have happened. When a red dwarf planet is relatively young, it may not have completely tidally locked, so its atmosphere may still be intact. The atmosphere may be thick enough to shield it from the X-rays, and it may not have had all its atmosphere stripped away into space for whatever reason. There's things that we can do, okay, to manage this. So I said, is it possible for life to evolve on a planet like this? And he went, maybe. The universe is pretty strange. Could we settle a planet like this? He says, if it's caught in a state before it loses its atmosphere, and you can preserve that atmosphere and introduce some sort of electromagnetic shielding technology of some kind, then maybe you can keep the planet to hold on to itself. And I said, okay, so let's assume some technological intervention here. Could we, if the need were great enough, could we settle a planet like this? And he went, all right, I'll let you have it, Drew. I went, yes. He says, what are you going to do with that? And I said, I'm going to write a science fiction story about it. And I'm going to put people on this world. And I'm not quite sure how they got there yet. And I'm not sure, all these other bits and pieces. But I talked my scientist into the possibility of life on red dwarf planets. And to be fair, his book and subsequent books on the subject, talk about that. And he's found my science, and he's acknowledged me in his real science books, and I've acknowledged him in my science fiction books, and together we've actually in some ways explored the possibilities a bit further than otherwise. And he said, if you want to sort of begin to visualize what it might be like on this planet, then read Drew Wagar's Shadeward Saga, which is great. Art follows science, follows art, follows science. It's quite good. So all those sort of bits and pieces are in there. So is it plausible? Yes, it is. you know, all that sort of stuff. But it's very different from the Earth, okay? And there's lots of practical problems, and we'll get to the practical problems, okay, of this sort of stuff. But where is it? Okay, it's got to be real. That's the next thing. Okay, so let's go back to some astronomy software. Okay, so over here I've got a program called Stellarium, which is effectively a night sky simulator. It's got a bit of a different emphasis from Space Engine. But it's very cool. It's again free. Yeah, it's free software. So go and grab Stellaris. Stellarium. Stellaris is a computer game. Let's get those two mixed up. Stellarium, not Stellaris. Okay, but both very good. But this is Stellarium. So this is kind of, you know, outside my house now, and you can see it's actually pretty good. I mean, I'm just looking out the window, and it looks pretty much like that. Other than there's a few more houses being built since this was and Jace there is quite right. The odds of the Earth surviving as long as it has are pretty low. Okay, so yeah, we're lucky to be here. So, you know, everything else considered, there we go. Yeah, Chris Funky. Well, you know, we can't use 1,000,000 to 1 because that's the Martians coming from Mars, right? So we can't use that one. The place had to be realistic. And I just looked on Wikipedia. What are the nearest red dwarfs to the Earth? And I could show you actually this. This is interesting. I went to, I think Wikipedia list of nearby stars, which I think it's got. There we go. And so that's a list of nearby stars. And I kind of went down the list here and thought, well, not doing Alpha Centauri, too obvious. Okay, Barnard Star, ditto. Wolf 359, can't do that. Star Trek, the Borg. Okay, Leland 21185. Well, that one sounds interesting. So I shortlisted Leland 21185, and in fact, early drafts of Shadeward, it was set in the Leland system. Then I looked at Luyten 726-8, and then there was Ross, blah 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 blah. Ellipse on Eridani, that's the home of Mr. Spock in Star Trek, so I can't use that one. Then there's Lakai 9352. Hadn't even heard of that. And lots of the others are no use at all. So then I thought, okay, well, let's have a look of list of stars in science fiction. And this is, I mean, Wikipedia is great for this stuff, okay? Stars and planetary systems in fiction. So, you know, here are all the ones that have come up, okay? And there's loads of them. So I went down here and I went to the ones I'd shortlisted. So I went to Leland. There it is, 21185. And I looked there and I thought, it's been used loads and loads of times. So I'm not going to use that because that's just another one, okay? In fact, notice here, Frontier Elite 2. It's even mentioned there. So, you know, so the Leland 21185 system has been used in science fiction loads and loads of time. So, you know, so that's no good at all. So then I had a look down some of the others, and similar things happened, okay, until I got to Lakai 9352. And there wasn't anything in it. Well, there were 2 entries, and somebody, bless them, has put the Shadeward Saga in now, which is quite cool. And although I haven't got my own Wikipedia entry, I'm waiting to arrive. So if anybody wants to Wikipedia me, then feel free, because I haven't appeared yet, and you're not allowed to write your own article about yourself on Wikipedia. It's very strict. But that wasn't there, of course, back then. But Lakai 9352 was not somewhere that had been used much by anybody else. So that's one of the reasons why I chose it. Okay. So that's, you know, that was a thing that happened. So I've now found a red dwarf. Okay, so what does Wikipedia say about that planet? So you know, so I did some research, looked it up. It's a red dwarf. It's not very far away. It's a particular type of star, and that's it. We don't know much about the system at all. Okay, it doesn't appear yet that we've detected any planets around it, so my story isn't immediately out of date. There could be, there's more than likely to be planets there, but we haven't done a proper search of that particular one at the time. But now, interesting enough here, June 2019. And this was absolutely fascinating to me, of course, because I've pretty much finished the entire saga by this point, bar the last book. 3 candidate planets were reported in orbit around Lacaille 9352. 2 planets in the circumstellar habitable zone. Dun dun dun. So I didn't know that, of course, when I was setting those theories off. But it appears there are some planets there, which is kind of cool. Okay, so I mean, they probably aren't like the one I described, but still cool, right? So that is a thing. So maybe I am a prophet. Yes, So there we go. See, but and I wait to see with bated breath what more we discover about the system. But back when I started, no idea what was there. So that was interesting. So then I thought, well, let's go back to my night sky. And this is my thing, and I can switch off the atmosphere, which is jolly handy to do, and it gives me a view of the stars right now. In order to show you where in space, now if in astronomy you'll recognise the constellations here, but I'll turn them on for everybody else who doesn't. So this is the constellation of Virgo, which at the moment is due south. If I was looking out this window, I'm looking east, so that's what I would expect to see. This is the Summer Triangle, some of you may have heard of. Deneb, Vega and Altair, very, very famous stars. And here is the Milky Way running across. Now, unfortunately, from the UK, that particular star is virtually impossible to see, which is the only annoying thing about this choice. Because the one thing that was good about the land system is it's much higher in the sky from the UK. So, unfortunately, I have to wait until, and I'm just going to adjust the time here. I have to wait until autumn, about this time of night actually, sort of 10 to 9ish, and there's this star here called Fomalhaut, which actually is kind of appears in the autumn, doesn't appear for very long in the sky, and but it's notably bright, and Fomalhaut is a relatively famous star as well. And I always go out in the autumn to see it because it sort of sits on its own here. There aren't many other bright stars in this kind of side. And Lacaille 9352, although it's not very far away, is so faint that you can't see it with the naked eye anyway. Resender's quite right. You can't see it with the naked eye. You need a telescope to see it. And so if I show you, the problem I've got also from the UK is if I search for it and I type in Lacaille 9352, it shows up as this, its other proper name there. It's unfortunately, even at that point, below the horizon. So I'm just going to advance time a little bit, and you can see that there it is. It literally skirts the horizon from the UK, so that my chances of actually seeing it from the UK are virtually zero, because at that height above the horizon, you've got the atmosphere and you've got haze and you've got, and the British weather is not ideal for astronomy, let's be fair. And it's a very dim star. It's magnitude 9. And magnitude 5, maybe 6 is the lowest you can see. Magnitude is a really odd scale. It goes backwards. Okay, so lower numbers are better in terms of brightness. So 6 is the minimum, the best you could possibly do with the naked eye. 7 or 8 is about where you go to with binoculars, and 9 you're going to need a telescope. Okay, so not only will I need a telescope to find it, it's so low on the horizon from the Earth, from the UK, that it would be a bit of an ask. We're going to try. Jason and I are going to try it. Okay, so if we manage to image it, because Jason has got an enormous telescope, which has a chance. But I think maybe a bit of deep sky photography might help us as well. So we're going to try various techniques to see if we can capture it. But I'd like to see it for myself, but it's going to be an elusive target for me in the UK. In order to see it better, I mean, on the simulation here, I can turn the ground off, which is obviously quite a useful technique. They can't do that in real life. But trying to see a magnitude 9 star at that altitude is going to be a bit of an ask. But we're going to give it a go. But that's where it is in space, okay? So that's if we are standing on the Earth, we can see where it is. It's visible. It's literally directly below the square of Pegasus there. So if you take the right hand side of the square of Pegasus and goes down to the bottom, there it is in space. So that's where it is. excuse for a trip to Oz. So yes, I think Fomalhaut is probably very, very well located for down there, and Southern California. A little bit more, is it more or less, or more? Yeah, a little bit less latitude actually, going down towards zero, towards the equator, would be helpful because it will rise higher in the sky. If I was even in Italy, I think I'd have a much better chance of seeing it. So, but from the UK, it's not well placed at any time of the year, and you can see the amount of time you have for viewing it. If I just roll the time forward, it skirts the horizon and then it quickly sets again. It's gone. So you've got only a couple of hours on a few nights of the year to have a chance of seeing it. So we're going to be, we need luck on our side to find it. But that's by the by. It's a real place that exists out there in space. And I wanted to sort of show you that. The other thing that's important actually about Lacaille is looking back the other way. And this I found, I didn't actually research this, and Jason the Base is on the stream, suggested as a late addition to the final book, a little thing about this, and I don't want to spoil it too much, but it doesn't tell you anything about what happens at the end of the book. But if we go to, and the beauty of Space Engine is we can go to these places, right? We can go to the Lacaille system just by pressing a button, which is fabulous. We can go to the position in space where Lacaille is. It'll take us just a moment here. I'm not quite sure. Sometimes it goes slow, sometimes it doesn't. There's the star Lacaille. And if I search for Sol, but don't press go to, I just aim back in that direction. For those of you who know your astronomy, there you can see actually the Andromeda Galaxy there. And if I take you back to, where is it up there? So Sol is there. I'm just going to move in that direction because some of the planets in the vicinity here are in the way. So you can't see this very clearly. So I'm just going to speed up and get past them. So they're not in the frame. So we're just literally looking at the stars. And for those of you who are familiar with astronomy, you may notice, I'll keep the dot focused there on Lacaille, on Sol as seen from the Lacaille system. But you'll notice up here an asterism, which is the plough, slightly distorted compared to Earth, but very recognisable still. And in the States they call this the Big Dipper. Ursa Major is what we call it in the Latin, or the Great Bear is the English translation. So it's very familiar. And from Lacaille, the sun is a bright star close to the constellation of one of the most iconic constellations in our night sky. So that was quite good. So an Ursa Minor would be up here. So yes, Ursa Minor is it's difficult to see because it's slightly distorted, but it's basically there. And below it, so from the night sky of, assuming you could see it, which of course you can't do, and we'll get to that. You can also see, here's a shape here. This is Leo the Lion, the constellation of Leo, which again is slightly distorted, but the sort of backwards question mark shape is still there. So in the night sky of Lacaille, the sun is in between two really rather iconic, recognisable constellations, which I thought was quite a nice thing to do. And thank you very much to Jason for suggesting I utilise that towards the end of the story. So that was a really good suggestion. That got in one of the late edits. So thank you very much for that, Jason. And those of you who get to the end of the story will understand what that's all about. So that was quite a cool thing. So it's a real place. It really exists. It might be the way I've described it. Okay, but it's one of those things I wanted to add in for the realism and the fun really of trying to make it a place that you can kind of okay. So that's quite good. So then we get into some of the challenges. Okay, so I started thinking, well, why are we on this planet? Okay, why are we on this planet? What got us here? Why are we even bothering? And I came up with a scenario, and basically to set the scene, I'm going to play you a video instead, because I think it sets it out faster than I can actually explain it. And I've been wittering on for an hour now, so give me a break. I'm going to show you a video, which is my sort of premonition, my trailer for the Shadeward series, which hopefully sets the scene as to how we ended up going to this place. A bit of CGI for you. So here we go, and I'll just cancel my mic for a moment. So that was my kind of rationale. The trailer is based on bits of CGI and all the other bits and pieces I've done, kind of condensed for the purposes of, well, that's what it's about. But we were forced to leave the Earth for reasons which are not have not yet been made clear, and that might be a prequel series, and I've got some ideas for that I might go and play with at some point in the future. I fully intend to do it, but we're forced to leave the Earth. Okay, it's not entirely clear whether that's a kind of like a global climate catastrophe or something else goes wrong, or to be decided. But that's the background. We've gone out into space. We've built generation ships of some kind of capability, but not with technology that's all that dissimilar, something that we would probably still be able to recognize here in the 21st century. And then we've gone to other worlds and we've attempted to colonize them. And the setup for the Shadeward Saga, where we end up in Lakai 9352, is we do manage to successfully colonize the planet, but something goes wrong. Okay, and over a period of many hundreds of years, the people who survive the colonization period lose their understanding of the technology, and it all becomes myth and legend and gets dropped into the past, and they kind of revert to a feudal style society, which then slowly is trying to drag itself back out of the Dark Ages as the story opens. So that's sort of the setup for the Shadeward Saga. And there's lots of other stuff to explore around that, but that's sort of the setup. Now there's all sorts of problems as if you lose technology on a world like this. You lose your GPS tracking systems, you lose your compasses, you lose your batteries, you lose all of that sort of stuff. What do you revert to? Well, you revert to what's available. There's plenty of sunlight. That's good. Your language would have to evolve to cater for the fact that there is no night and day cycle. So this was one of the hardest things that when I had writing the book, is I had to come up with naming conventions for everything that you would normally call a day or a night or tomorrow or next week, because none of those concepts exist on this planet. There is no tomorrow. There is no sunset. There's no sunrise. All those sort of things are gone. Okay, there's no next week. There's no do you remember the other day? Because everything blurs into the sameness. On the surface of the planet, the star stays in the same place in the sky always. It's totally constant. The only variation you see is when you travel around on the planet's surface. So time, direction, and the ability to say I'll meet you next week don't exist on this planet. So I had to come up with a mechanism for dealing with that, and you'll discover that as you read the books as to how I solved it. And I think I've solved it reasonably well, because there's two things. There's one is telling the time, and the other one is navigating. Now, when you're on land, you can kind of use reference points. Well, if you go to that mountain and turn right and travel for a number of steps, let's say, then you'll see a valley, and then you kind of turn to your left, and then you'll find the city. You can do that when the landmarks are solid and don't move. That's okay. You could draw a map. You could still draw a map. Even if you didn't have any high technology, you could still map things. But travel out of sight of land across a sea gives you problems, because you've got no navigation markers. There's no way to tell which way you're going, because there are no directions. And I made an assumption that all of the high technology, everything from magnets upwards, had been lost for whatever reason. There'd been it's almost like a post-apocalyptic scenario whereby nothing electronic has apparently survived. There's no magnets, there's no compasses. The technology level that the people have, it's bows and arrows, it's swords, it's basic building materials, maybe some glass, maybe some bits and pieces like that, basic forging skills. So it's a sort of feudal, medieval, Dark Ages type scenario that we find ourselves in as the story opens. And that's, if you're looking at that sort of world with people on it looking up into space, they've never seen a star. Okay, they don't know what the stars are. They've never seen one. They don't exist as far as they're concerned. There's nothing else in the sky which allows you to allows you to make any reference points. The planet's, somebody's mentioned it again, Alan, thank you. It's tidally locked. The star never moves, okay? So it never sets. So it's always bright. There's no concept of darkness. So, darkness is an unfamiliar thing to these people. They've never lived, well, all these sort of things. And all the creatures that do exist on the surface of the planet are adapted to constant daylight, except for the humans. And they notice these things. They go, well, we're a bit different to the other creatures on this planet, but we don't know why. And most people have gone, as people do, well, never mind. We've still got to farm, we've still got to eat, we've still got stuff to do, don't worry about it. And so, that's those sort of things. Now, I've mapped the history of the planet in a lot of detail. So there's a very detailed timeline, some of which you get to see in the books. But timelines are for the author to figure things out. They don't normally get referenced in the book directly. But there is a catalogue of events that builds you up to the present time. And we're about 2,000 years after the colonisation of this planet when the story opens. And everything that's gone before is myth and legend, okay? There's strange stories of the past, but nobody really believes them. Nobody's sure what's true, and it doesn't matter anyway because life is hard enough just trying to get on with the business of survival. But what you've got is various different types of people. And looking around at society today, I was watching my Twitter feeds and my Facebook feeds, and just as authors do, going, I wonder what if. And a lot of stuff around about that time was talking about the influence of the patriarchy. Now, whether you think the patriarchy exists or you don't think it exists, the idea behind it is that it's our world is skewed in favour of male gender, and for our literature and our social structures are designed, if you like, almost, or have evolved to a point where men tend to end up in positions of power by the nature of the structure. And once those structures exist, they tend to self-perpetuate. That's the patriarchy, as it's quite often called. Now I thought, well, wouldn't it be? What happens if it's the other way round? I said, why don't I invent a scenario whereby actually there's not a patriarchy at all, but for reasons that I'll work out in a moment, it's a matriarchy. Let's just flip it the other way around. And we can take all the kind of aggressive, arrogant parts of male dominance, if you like, and let's turn it into female dominance instead. Let's play around with those ideas. Let's turn them upside down and see what happens. And so I thought, well, I need a mechanism. Why would the women be dominant on this world? What would have been happening? And I basically imbued many of the women on this fictional world with a strange power. And I'm not going to spoil you for that because you need to read the books to find out what it's all about. But many of them have this ability to do things which are unusual, okay? And they are not, it's not the Force like in Star Wars. This is not a magical power. It's proper science fiction, and if you read the books, you'll understand how it works. But because the people on the planet don't understand what the power is, as far as they're concerned, it's one of two things. It's either magic, in which case it's witchcraft, right? Or it's a power given by some deity to the chosen ones, okay? So that's how people perceive this ability. And over time, it is given, this power manifests itself in women, and they use it to control, because they can. It is a power that is you can't defeat it with military might. You can't get close. You can't get around it. So the population of the world becomes subservient to this power, and many conflicts are fought as a result in the history of in the world. But you end up, as the story opens, with a very dominant matriarchal society based around a belief that this power is given to them by a deity, and that they are the sort of holy representatives of this deity on the planet. And the deity is actually the star. They believe that Lakai, the star above, is the source of their power, and they worship the star as a goddess, obviously, because it's a matriarchy, not a patriarchy. So the goddess Lakai is the fixture of this religious group, and arguably unlike many of the religions that we have on the earth, their claims for healing and kind of miraculous capabilities actually come true, because this power is a real manifestation of something. Okay, and I'll leave, that's the tantalizing bit for you to read the story. This power is actually a real thing that they can employ to do their command, which gives them a sense of, we are superior. We are superior because we have this power. If we weren't to be chosen, why would we be given this power? And they seek this power out. They're looking for this power at all times, because it's what basically underpins their civilization. They are the priestesses that are referred to in the story. They believe they are holy and anointed, and they are very, very strict at how they kind of enforce it. And that's the priestesses. Now, far away on an island somewhere out in the sea is a bunch of people who have an odd history, and they are more technically aligned in their thinking, and they discover ancient records of their past that seem to indicate they've been exiled from the mainland for reasons which are not clear. And all they have in their history books is, we were defeated by strange witches out of the darkness. Don't go back there. That's all that's sort of left. And of course, for most people, that's like, well, I'm not going there. That sounds really, really scary. But for a few people, it's like, wow, I wonder what that's all about. I'm going to go looking. Okay, I'm going to go looking. I'm going to go find out what's really happened in the past. Was it really true? What happened to us? Why are we on this island? And all those sort of stuff. And that leads them on to the question. And that's effectively where the story opens. So you have representatives from two different, very, very different cultures, trying. One very much dominated. Very much dominated on control and submission and totalitarian state, and another who's on the verge of almost a technological innovation and trying to find out about their origins. And that's the setup, okay? And it's, as a writer, it's deliberately designed for conflict to be a thing. So you can see those two worldviews are very much in opposition to each other. So in order to tell the story, I then thought, right, as any good writer does, I need some characters. What characters do I need to have? And I wanted to tell the story through the eyes of people who are less jaded than perhaps normal. So I wanted to write it through the eyes of younger people. So I invented 3 characters, and those of you who know the stories will know these. But so let me just introduce you to them quickly. I did start off, to be fair, what else have I got in here? So I did start off with an older woman who was going to be kind of the leader of the priestesses, and she would grow to understanding throughout the story and change things. But that didn't work. So she got relegated to a slightly less fundamental character, but still very important in the leader of these priestesses, and she became the high priestess. And I was originally going to tell the story through her eyes, but decided not to. So then I thought, well, why don't I start with a character who is I think is it this one? No, that's a red dwarf star. I've got some other shots of hurricanes and things. There we go. That's quite nice. And so on and so forth. So I ended up starting with a younger character. So I started off with a young, well, she's not that young, but she's a young woman who has a really, really, actually, she doesn't look like it here because she's kind of all nicely tidied up, but these are the sort of pieces of artwork I use to inspire my thinking. And and this is one I used at the time. Now she doesn't use a sword. This is a really, really early piece of artwork that I found that kind of set me thinking along the right way. But she was, she's a young girl. She's orphaned at a young age. She's fought for her survival in the sort of slums and the gutters and the sewers of the main city. So she's very earthy and very kind of hard done by in the sense of where she's come from. And she is pretty much the most important character because it's through her we experience both sides of all the equations of what life is actually like on this planet. So she was very, very important, and she's got a very significant distinguishing feature, which is that is referenced often in the book, deliberately just to set the scene, that she has black hair and blue eyes, which is a relatively unusual combination, and I just wanted to put it in there as something distinct. So she has black hair and blue eyes, and that's, you just know at the moment I mention the words black hair and blue eyes, you'll know who I'm talking about once you've read the story. Okay, so she's very distinctive. That's the idea, that you'll remember her. That's a good question. Okay, does Shadeward kind of fall into young adult literature because of the age of the primary character? I don't think it does. I mean, it's trying to deal with adult themes. It's not really a coming of age story that a young adult novel would be. And I've deliberately, and we've discussed this a bit before, I've deliberately not written it to genre guidelines, which is why most publishers won't touch it with a barge pole. When I said, is it science fiction? I said, kind of. Well, is it a fantasy story? Kind of. Is it a coming of age story? Kind of. Is it a space opera? Not sure. No. So it doesn't. It's a story that transcends genres. It's not genreless. It's got lots of genres in it, but you can't really pigeonhole it into a particular genre. It just doesn't work. And I've done that deliberately. I've written the story that I wanted to write. But it has this young lady. She's called Kiri. Her surname is never revealed because she doesn't know what it is until right at the end. Okay, and then she figures out who she is, and that's by happenstance. But she's effectively a vagabond who's grown up around the edge. Now there's nothing particularly special about her until she is attacked one day, and in the first chapter of the first book, it's revealed that she seems to have this latent, strange ability that the priestesses covet, and that sets her on a journey. So that's Kiri, and she is actually one of my favourite literary characters that I've created. She's much more complicated and nuanced, than, for example, Salome in the Elite stories that I wrote. Although I spent quite a lot of time on Salome Kahina, I spent a lot more time on Kiri because she needed a lot more depth to be put into her to figure out her character arc over a series of 4 books. So that's the thing. Then this was another view of the planet that I used kind of inspiration. Maybe this is what one of the cities would look like on the surface with the star and sky. You wouldn't see the stars like that. That's not right. But that's the sort of inspirational artwork I was using. Different views from the surface, different renderings. This one's quite nice. With the star at a low angle, maybe we're out near the frozen wastes. You'll notice here there's something going across the star, and that's very important. That basically in my hypothetical solar system of Lakai, there's a gas giant between the star and this habitable world, which again is a possible thing. It's quite common that you may have come across the term hot Jupiter, which is what this basically is. So there's a large gas giant between the star and the habitable world, and that's actually what they use as the basis for their timekeeping. So there's some good stuff there. So yeah, Jay says Kiri put me through the ringer emotionally. So Kiri is a character who's been deliberately crafted for you to love and hate. Okay, because you can see actually a lot of the time she tries to do the right thing, but life can. She's one of those rather unlucky characters where life often conspires against her. And because of that, she's turned into quite a hard and bitter character as a result of the life experiences she's had. And as a result of that, she then goes on to make bad choices for which you have some sympathy for. But she also does things for which you think, that's not very nice. So she's one of those characters you think, what's she going to do next? And is she going to do that? Or is she, oh my God, what's she doing now? She's a character to kind of watch out for. So that's Kiri. She's I've found her. I've actually dreamt of her. That's how much work I've put into this. She's not a person I would necessarily like to meet in real life, but she's very compelling because she's a very interesting person. So she's had a brutal upbringing. She does encounter some kindness during her time, and that changes her focus. But she then is indoctrinated. She has bad teaching. She is given bad advice. She acts on the bad advice, thinking she's doing a good thing, and that backfires. All those sort of things happen to her. So she's a very conflicted woman as the story evolves. So these are the three main characters for which I've got some imagery. So and I've kind of tried to design these myself a bit, which isn't necessarily the best way, but I've only got a limited talent in terms of CGI. So let me just turn that one off for a moment. So what you've got Kiri in the foreground here. You have a character by the name of Meru, who is a young. He looks a little bit too old here, really, but he's. There's a better picture actually. I think this one. Maybe it's this one that I need. Let's try. No, not that one. Is it that one? No. I've got them out of order. There we go. That's a better picture. They're not perfect. The CGI is not great, but it gives you an idea. Okay, so Kiri on the left, we've talked about. She's kind of the mainish character. If there were main characters, she would be the saga is really about her journey. But these two are very, very important in here as well. So we have Meru. Now Kiri grows up and lives in the land of the priestess matriarchy. Okay, that's where she is. She gets pulled into that by nature of she starts to develop these powers. Kiri doesn't have a glove. No, she should have a glove. So I haven't got that sorted out yet. Well spotted. And then we have Meru. Now Meru grows up. He's a youngish man. They're all about similar sort of age, but youngish man growing up in the technologically emerging island civilization, and he is basically the instrument through which we learn about what happened to the world. He's very inquisitive. He's technically minded. He is shipwrecked at one point and is picked up by a very strange vessel. More of which is part of the story, and he's out on a journey to discover the lost technological background to the planet that they're living on, and he ultimately ends up uncovering all sorts of weird and wonderful secrets about the planet. So he's the instrument through which that is told. So he's very oddly enough, he's ended up very like my eldest son by accident. Because he's totally kind of how does this machine work, and we could do this, we could do that. He gets distracted by technology and shiny lights and all sorts of things. He'll pick up something. How does it work? I need to know how it works. All that sort of stuff. He's very scientific, very inquisitive. He's the mechanism through which we learn about the past of the planet, because he's always digging and trying to find out how stuff works. And he encounters the ruins of the previous civilization that was here, that is that has fallen apart around their ears, but he knows that there was stuff that was incredibly technologically advanced, and he knows how much knowledge therefore they've lost over time. So he's the character through which it happens. Now the third one is a young lady. Her name is Zoella, and Zoella is the heart of the story, because Kiri is very brutal and matter of fact. If you have an argument with Kiri and she wins, then she'll preen and be superior. If she loses, she'll probably just whack you over the head with a stick, and that'll be the end of you. She doesn't take prisoners. She's not a very for the most of the story, she's not a very empathetic person. I think that's probably the best way to describe it. That's not what she's like. Okay. Meru is a bit of a mix. Most of the time he's kind of like, well, how does this thing work? He's not all that bothered about people. People are a bit of a nuisance as far as he's concerned, because they get in the way of him understanding stuff, and he doesn't have time to deal with all sorts of stuff. But Zoella is the heart of the story. Now she's had a difficult upbringing as well, but she comes from a much gentler nature. Her nature is always to trust, is always to think the best of people, which clearly gives her a lot of grief and heartache along the way as well. And her story is all about basically, the people, why can't we reconcile? Why can't we be at peace? Why can't there be an understanding? All those sort of questions that you want posed about the conflict that exists on this world. She's trying to wrestle the way through and say, well, why can't we just get on? She's asking those sort of questions about the world. And she's the mechanism through which we see the possibilities of what could happen on this planet and how things might have worked out. So she's sort of, I suppose, the heart of the story. Now, lots of basically these three are introduced in the first book. Why can't we just get along? Exactly right. They're introduced in the first book. They don't actually meet up until a little bit later on. And when they meet up, all hell starts breaking loose, because, of course, they've got different world views of all sorts of things. And so Kiri is heavily indoctrinated by the priestesses, and believes that she is an anointed sort of acolyte stroke apostle of the goddess Lakai. You know, she's absolutely convinced that that's the right thing. Meru is much more convinced that technology, you know, are the lost legacy of the people who went before us. We need to uncover it. We need to make it work again. We need to find out why we're supposed to be. Why are we here? He said that's the reason we exist. And Zoella's sort of a little bit in the middle ground, but she actually ends up having probably the most important role in the entire story as we get right to the end. And that's spoiler territory, so we can't go there. But the story is told through these three characters. And then there's a supporting cast of people who kind of go around them, which are, some of them are in there for a little bit of comic relief, some of them a little bit there because, you know, they need to be there. But, you know, these are young people and need people to look up to. So there are some older characters who act as mentors and advisors and, you know, people that manage other bits and pieces as well. So that's, you know, those are the eyes through which we see the story. And I spent a lot of time working on their mannerisms. So Kiri does end up wearing a black glove, but the reasons for the black glove are spoilers, so I can't tell you what that is either. But she ends up wearing a black glove for reasons. And she normally would be carrying a staff, which I think I showed you in that picture there. Oh no, she's not carrying it there either. That's interesting. Anyway, you'll find out why you know, she's very well trained in the arts of combat. She likes beating people up and killing people. She's not very nice, but she's interesting. Okay, so, and she's very, very hard and very, very brutal, but she believes she's right, so, you know, she has the power to prove it. So all those sort of things are there for the way those characters interact. And then there are other bits and pieces. Okay, so the nice thing that Meru starts to uncover is he starts finding and fixing, with the help of other people, bits of technology which give you, the reader, a kind of clue as to what's going on. And so one of the things that I invented for Shadeward, just going back over here for a moment, one of the things I invented for Shadeward is based, again, on real science, an event that happened on the Earth. And some of you may know about this, the Carrington event. Okay, this happened in 1859. Okay, long before any of us were born. There was, in 1859, there was a massive and, you know, historically completely off the scale solar flare. Okay, there's been nothing like it recorded since, and we don't know how often things like this happen to our star, but it happened at least once in living, well, not in living memory, but in historical memory. In 1859, there was something called a white light flare, it, you know, it erupted from the surface of the sun, and you know, loads of sunspots and lots of weird activity. And, you know, astronomers back then were able to see this and know that something strange was happening. And it was a massive, massive coronal mass ejection, blasted out from the surface of the sun, and it hit the Earth in 1859. And they detected it because, you know, for various other reasons, they saw aurora in the sky as far down, you know, all over Europe, all over the United States, way down into Europe, far lower than, because aurora are normally confined to the poles. And they saw these glowing lights in the sky at night. And they reported that telegraph systems all over Europe and North America failed. Okay, so this was the old that sort of stuff that were relatively new at the time. And they tried to switch the telegraph systems off, disconnected the power, and found they were still operating. In fact, they were operating with too much power in them still, even though they were switched off, to the point where electric telegraph operators were getting electric shocks from the systems. There was so much power in the telegraph systems, even though the power is off, that you know, telegraph pylons through sparks. Some telegraph operators could continue to send and receive messages despite having disconnected their power supplies, and the power was coming from the star, from the sun. The solar wind was hitting the Earth way much more powerful than it would normally be. Okay, for the duration of this coronal mass ejection, and power lines buried in the ground were acting as electromagnetic induction coils. Okay, so as the solar wind and the Earth's magnetic field wrestled with each other, those magnetic field lines were moving back and forth across the wires in North America, in the United States, and in Europe. And, moving magnetic field, wire, current is generated as a result. Electricity at ground level, out of nowhere, apparently, from this coronal mass ejection. Now, that's a real thing that happened. Now, if this happened today, it would be really, really bad news, okay? Because we're so utterly dependent now on electricity. This would cause absolute mayhem if something similar happened. It could happen tomorrow. This is what's rather interesting about this one. Nothing like this has happened since 1859. Nothing as big. There is some evidence that in ice cores and various other bits and pieces like that events like this have happened in the historical past, not too long ago. And maybe every few hundred years, our sun does in fact blast out a massive coronal mass ejection and do things like this to the planet. Now, if there's no wires in the ground, nobody's really going to notice. Okay, medieval technology wouldn't spot this. Neither would the ancient Greeks. It's only once you have refined metals in long strand for wires for communication purposes that this becomes a bit of an issue. This would make absolute havoc with the electrically connected world that we have today, with all the cables and everything that we have here. It would cause mayhem. So it is a potential problem, right? But nothing this big has ever been seen since. Okay, nothing this big has ever been seen since. But it got me to thinking. Okay, it got me to thinking. Hang on a minute. They got free electricity from space because of the star and the electromagnetic field. And I played around with this, and I got in touch with some astrophysicists I know and some electricians I know, and said, look, if I postulate a planet whereby the electromagnetic field is much, much stronger than it is, okay, on the Earth, and the solar wind is much, much stronger than it is from our sun, which in the red dwarf system it is, I said, if a technology laid down capability and had an understanding of how to harness that and channel it, could we generate electricity at ground level to be consumed by a technology? And the answer is yes. And it wouldn't be all that difficult to do. You could engineer a system. If you had a constant flow of electromagnetic capability, you could rig up a system of wires and various other bits of contraption to harness electrical energy generation at ground level using this kind of capability. You can't do it on Earth because it isn't strong enough most of the time, but every so often, even on the Earth it is. But on this hypothetical planet around a red dwarf, you could potentially have free electricity at ground level. And I thought, well, this is fantastic because this allows me to do other cool stuff, okay? So I postulated a theory that the technology that this planet was based on was going to be sort of non-polluting, free electrical energy from the star. And that's what they were going to base their technology around. Unfortunately, due to the other calamities that have affected the story, that technology has been lost. But small bits of it have survived. Okay, small bits of it have survived. And Meru, going back to Meru for a moment, Meru uncovers some of that technology and begins to understand how it works. Okay, and that puts him on a quest to figure out the origins of the technology and the origins of humanity as it exists on this planet. And that then, that leads to a understanding of the truth, and ultimately puts him in conflict with the revealed truth as the priestesses understood it, because of course they've got holy books given to them by the goddess which tell how things are supposed to be ordered, which, surprise, surprise, isn't quite lined up with what Meru finds out, which leads into conflict and things. And you'll see that a lot in my books is the conflict between religion and science is a constant thing. But on this planet, the priestesses do have a genuine power to do things and alter things around them, which is scientifically accurate as well. So the power that the priestesses are able to manifest in the books is scientifically possible. It isn't magic, I can give that much away, but how it works, you're going to have to figure out by reading it. But it's all plausible stuff, and that was the hallmark of the Shadeward Saga all the way through, is it must be plausible. It must be even likely or potentially possible. I will not have any magic in my story. There's no magic. There's no magic. It has to work with physics as we understand it, in all those sort of things. So that's the essence of the story. Absolute firm scientific underpinning, and then you build on top of that everything else. So Glenn says, so did you design the 3 characters first as parts of making an interesting attraction for the story? Yes, I kind of did. I said I want a character that's indoctrinated into the religious way of thinking. I want a character who is going to present the technological side of the story, and I want somebody who wants to bring all worldviews together and try and reconcile them. Those are the 3 elements. That's why I ended up with 3 main characters, and then I started forming the character traits, thinking, okay, well, if I'm going to have somebody who's indoctrinated by the priestesses, how do they become indoctrinated by the priestesses? It has to be a woman because it's a matriarchy, so yeah, the gender is quite easy to figure out at that point. So Kiri became Kiri. You know, the names are sort of just plucked. I don't really spend too much time on them. Okay, what should I call her? Should I call her Miri, Kiri, Philly, Susanna? You know, I come up slightly. You know, Kiri. Yeah, Kiri works. Boom, there we go. Job done. Yeah, I don't spend very long on name creation. As long as they're distinct, you know. So you go, okay, Kiri's one, Meru's another. You know, you can tell them apart. They're not like Kiri and Kiriella or something like that, which would be just confusing. So I keep it, you know, distinct, but I don't spend too much time on it because it doesn't really matter what they're called. They're just there for reference. And then you know, the character types. Okay, so if she's indoctrinated, she's young, and she's had a hard life, what's she going to be like? Well, she's going to be pretty brutal. She's going to be used to survival. She's going to be used to fighting first and thinking and talking later. So that's going to make her sharp. She's going to have to, you know, if she's still alive at this point, she's going to have to survive several fights. So physically, she's going to be extremely fit. You know, she's going to be used to punching and fighting her way out of situations. She'll have, you know, skin peppered with scars. She'll have the, you know, the marks of a hard life. So that's the sort of person she is. Zoella, by the opposite chance, you know, she'll retreat from a fight, you know, at least a physical fight most of the time. So she will, you know, she'll flinch back from a fight. So she won't be scarred. She won't be physically fit in the same sort of way. She'll probably be, you know, she won't bear much resemblance to Kiri at all. And Meru is in a different category. Now, he comes from a society which is actually a lot more civilized, a lot more stable, a lot less brutal. So he's a bit more educated. He's, you know, he's going to be better educated. So he's going to be able to understand these things better because he's had that sort of background. But he's not going to be a fighter. So when Kiri and Meru do finally encounter each other, Kiri is able to completely subdue him within moments because she's used to beating people up. You know, so and he finds her very, very scary because she is brutal and able to kill people, and she doesn't think too much about it. So, you know, those sort of character interactions is where the fun starts happening from a writer's perspective. And all of those things build in. And so then I thought, well, if we've got electrical power generation at ground level, what would we do with that? So we could have, if the electricity is powerful enough, which it sounds like it can be, and I worked out rough amounts of voltage and amps and watts and sort of thing, it's enough to power machinery. Okay, it's enough to power machinery. So you can have ships that are powered by electricity, generated by this solar flare interaction. You could have flying machines if they were light enough. You could have flying machines powered by freely available electricity, which is sort of beaming down from space. I thought, fantastic! You know, that's a lost technology that Meru can uncover. And so I thought, well, what kind of, you know, what sort of ship would he encounter? And I came across this lovely little story here about the first ever steam turbine powered ship. Actually, I'm looking at the wrong screen. Sorry. This one, the Turbinia. Okay. Now this is a vessel. It's a real vessel. Well, at least it was. I think it's now actually in a museum somewhere. Yeah, it is. It's in Newcastle. So we could go and look at this. I'd like to do this at some point. The Turbinia was, well, it is. Let me just get a decent picture of it. There it is. It's a small vessel. Okay. And it was fitted, you know, everything up until this point had been a steam piston engine. Okay, so high pressure steam was forced into a piston, like a car piston, which moves a plunger, which is then rotated to a crankshaft. That crankshaft then drives a propeller blade, and that's how the ship worked. All steam powered ships were piston steam engines up until that point, and they had a maximum speed of maybe 20-25 knots. Okay, and that was they couldn't make them rotate any faster than that under the steam pressure that they had and the mass of the rotating flywheels. You couldn't make it strong enough, and so it wouldn't rotate. So there was a as far as the Navy was concerned, there was a top speed to steam powered ships, and it was about 25 knots, and that was all you could do until this guy came along. Okay. And what he did is he invented the steam turbine. Okay, and what you do with the steam turbine is you inject steam at high pressure against fans of a rotating core, and you use the steam pressure to directly drive the turbine. Rather than turning it into reciprocating pistons, you just drive the core at very high pressure. And this was, far more efficient way of generating power than the reciprocating piston engines were. And this guy, he was a bit of a rogue. Okay, so this is and it's worth looking this story up. It was the first steam turbine powered steamship built in 1894. Okay, so this is quite a long time ago. But basically, Charles Algernon Parsons invented this ship. He tried to sell it to the Navy. And they turned him down. Don't be ridiculous. Stupid idea. Go back. And so what he did, he built it. I don't know quite how he managed it. It's a fascinating story. He basically, it says here, as an audacious publicity stunt, Turbinia, which was faster than any ship at the time, raced between the two lines of Navy ships. So there was a Navy display going on for the Queen. Raced between two lines of Navy ships and steamed up and down in front of the crowd and the princes, whilst easily evading a Navy picket boat that tried to pursue her and almost swamped it with her wake. So this guy was basically showing off in front of the royal family with his ship in front of the entire British Navy. They couldn't stop him. Okay, they couldn't stop him because they had nothing that could keep up with his ship. And so it was a league of, it was a order of magnitude better in terms of performance than anything that existed at the time. So needless to say, virtually every steamship built after this point pretty quickly became, other than very, very large ships where the piston engines were still working, became a turbine-powered steamship because of the speed. Now I thought, well, that's an interesting story, but that's not quite what I'm looking for. So I basically took this, and I thought, well, what happened? What if there's an electrically powered ship left over from the technology that the ancient people on this planet had, that somehow manages to be preserved in some form or another? And somebody stumbles upon it. So there's an electrically powered ship, and the ship in the story becomes kind of one of the characters too, because it's a little bit Millennium Falcon-y, really, in the sense that it doesn't always work, and the people who are on it don't really understand how it works properly. They sort of know most of how it works, and they've figured out quite a lot of it, but they don't really, they're not all that confident in how to manage the ship. So in a way, like the Millennium Falcon's hyperdrive always conks out at the wrong time. The ship in the Shadeward Saga, which is called Mobilus, I know I'm quite close. It's the ship is electrically powered. Okay, and it's discovered. They find it and they use it to go on their stories of adventure. So it's inspired by the Turbinia, and the reason it's called the Mobilus is basically from the book Jules Verne. Everyone knows Jules Verne, and he had a book called 20,000 Leagues Under the Sea, which is a very old story now. But 1871. I was very much inspired by this era. Actually, I like the 19th century. And in that one, obviously, there's an electrically powered ship, or it's actually a submarine, really, called the Nautilus. But it's electrically powered. So I took the inspiration of the Nautilus from Captain Nemo, and the Turbinia from actual real history, sort of combined and mashed them up and came up with the Mobilus. And the reason it's called the Mobilus is there is a chapter in 20,000 Leagues Under the Sea called Mobilis in Mobili, which basically stands as movement through movement, which is basically the submarine moving through the sea. And I thought, Mobilis, what a great name for a ship. And hence the Mobilis is born. So there's lots of little things like that. As you read Shadeward, you will notice little nods to classic literature in there as well. It's all kind of things that are in there. So the ship plays a very important role in the story, and I won't spoil it any further than that. The ship is important, not just because it's a vehicle for them moving around, but it plays a role. And but it's not 100%. It's quite often breaking down and things are going wrong. So that gives you some drama as well. Those all things are sort of in there. And I wanted that old school. And a few people who've read my stuff say that I do write in a bit of a sort of classic-y science fiction adventure sort of way, which I don't think is a bad thing. I mean, that's what I try and do. I've got a Jules Verne Journey to the Centre of the Earth, 20,000 Leagues Under the Sea, H.G. Wellsy sort of flavour to everything in there as well. So that's quite good too. So the Turbinia is inspiration. So is the Nautilus from 20,000 Leagues Under the Sea. Those things are in there as well. But it's all based on plausible stuff. So the electricity that you would be able to generate in this environment is a real phenomena that did actually happen on the Earth, and it's about taking that next step for a science fiction series. So that's what I did there. So that's all quite good. So by this point you've got the technology, you've got the environment, you've got the backstory, you've got the characters, and then it's a case of writing the stories. Okay. Do I have a doctor called Aranax? No, I don't. Very good, Chris. Very good. But there is a character piece in there. So it's like I'm looking at this, and then thinking, okay, well, where do I take these three characters? We want to explore this world through their eyes. That's something that we do, and these characters are clearly going to meet and interact and have conflict, and stuff's going to happen to them. They have adventures and things. What else would happen in here? So I've worked out, and this would be spoiler territory if I explain it, but so I can't. But there is a connection between all these characters, which becomes obvious as you read the story, and as a result of that, misunderstandings of the interactions that they have and their relationships with each other become incredibly important. So there are elements of love, there is elements of romance, there is elements of hatred, there is elements of conflict and anger, and all of those human conditions are mixed up, and these three characters experience all of them, and those around them are driven by their allegiances to them, or their friendships, or their hatreds, and all those sort of things happen as part of the sort of stuff. So that's all mixed in there as well. So what I suppose I've tried to do with Shadeward is address all the sort of kind of science fact shortcomings that I've seen in science fiction. I wanted a really plausible place to set my adventures on. I wanted those adventures to be deep and meaningful in the sense that you get a sense of uncovering secrets and technologies and lost histories and myth and legends, and I wanted it to be through the eyes of people that we could kind of relate to. They're like us. They've had different upbringings. Some of us will relate more strongly to some of the others. The characters are people that you can kind of admire or fear or hate, or all those sort of things. Okay, you're sort of trying to put all those kind of bits and pieces together, and they've been deliberately written that way to kind of pull at your emotions and try and drive you further into the story. The idea being that if you get to the end of one book, what happens next? I've got to find out. So that's the idea, obviously, with writing a series of books, is that you hope people will get to the end of the series. And of course, tonight is the day that the last book in this series goes live. So here they are. Let me switch back to my my main camera, direct to camera focus. There we go. So the first book, and I apologise for the green screen because it's going to do slightly funny things to the covers, but this is the first one, Shadeward Emanation, and they all begin with Shadeward and then a word that begins with E and ends in shun. And so emanation, and so if you know your English, emanation is a word that basically means something that is radiating outwards, so, or awakening. That's what the word emanation means. So the first book, that one came out in 2015. It took me quite a long time to get it out, even though I started writing this in 2010. This one didn't come out till 2015 because this other thing called Elite Reclamation happened. It sort of derailed my plans slightly in the years 2013, 2014. But you know all about that. So this one sets the scene and gets all the characters into the action and stuff starts to happen. It explains some of the backstory. And then the next one is Shadeward Exoneration. This is book 2. And this one deepens the relationship. So the characters all get to meet and they begin to understand where each other's coming from. And exoneration, of course, is a word that basically means forgiveness. So that's what all that is. It's a feature of this sort of book. A growing understanding of what's actually going on. The third book is Enervation. Just waiting for my camera to start focus. Yeah, the green isn't working too well there. And Enervation is, oddly enough, it's a word that means the opposite of what you might think it means. You'd have thought if innovate is, to make something more powerful, it's actually the other way around. If you innovate something, you drain it of power. So that's what innovation means. Something's being drained away. And that's the theme of that one. And the final one is Expiation. This is the one that's literally been launched today. So the paperback has been out for a little while. Expiation is the final, the fourth book in the series. And expiation means atonement. Or making recompense. So that's the flavour of the words. And I deliberately chose the words, and I deliberately chose the colours, to represent different things. So you've got a sort of orangey warmth to the first book, which is quite nice. You've got a very cold feel to the second one. This deep purple colour, and the reasons for that is we go to different places. So the icy wastes that ring the world on the outside. Well, we go there because I wanted to see what those locales were like, and the huge storm at the centre underneath where the sun is. We go there as well, and all the places in between, and obviously there's conflict and fighting and all sorts of stuff that goes on, but that kind of comes to a head as you would expect in a narrative story in the last book. Hence the sort of blood red colour that you end up with at the end. So they're all quite distinct. The colours are there to sort of tell a bit of a story. The titles are there to tell a bit of a story. And then somebody and Glenn and Big Boo have been talking about what do the symbols on the front covers mean. Well, that of course is spoilers. So there is a little bit of a secret to those. And you'll notice if you compare them side by side, they do indicate something. So there is a little bit of a puzzle in there for you to kind of play around with. And you'll notice that the last one is has reference to the stuff that's gone before. So maybe that will give you a clue. So have a if you've got all 4 books, the covers do connect in some. I can't, at least not at the moment. I might come back and do another stream on what that actually means, because I can't give. It's impossible to explain it without spoiling it. So I'm going to let people have a little bit of a figure out on that one. That represents a decade. So that lot there is a decade of me crafting my science fiction world. So I think I'm justified in being reasonably proud of that. It's a big chunk of my life that I've spent doing Shadeward. I've had an absolute blast doing it, and it's finished as a thing now. And one of the things I have said is that I won't revisit those characters. Okay, so the stories of these lovely people, of Kiri, of Meru, and Zoella. That's it for those characters. Okay, their arcs start and conclude in those series of 4 books. I won't be going back there again, because I like to leave you almost wanting more. It's self-contained. If I added more to it, I think I'd be diluting the stories. I think they're good enough. They're good enough as it is. Now, what I am planning to do, somebody's already mentioned that, the Hagara series. So if we go back to Space Engine very briefly, and I'm almost out of time, so we do need to close up. But if I go back to Space Engine for a moment, over here, remember when we were in the Lakai system? Well, let's go back to Sol actually, because that's where we're supposed to be. And let's go to our chart. Here again, if we go back out, I do like that. Not that far. To the stars that are, not too far away from Sol. Now, Lakai 9352 in my series of Shadeward books is one of the places that was, successfully colonized, and you find out a little bit about that at the end of the 4th book. But the question has to be asked: well, if we managed to colonize one, what happened to the others? All we know is on this particular planet, the colonization was sort of successful, but technology and civilization regressed for 2,000 years. Okay, so 2,000 years has passed since the colonization event. Now, let's assume, and it's a reasonable assumption, that generation ships were sent out to other places. What happened to them? Some of them probably didn't make it. Some of them may have been successful, and technology proceeded on, and civilization proceeded on from the colonization point and continued to advance. So what would 2,000 years of technological evolution have done to humanity out in space after a colonization event? And that, which I'm currently working on in my head, is the subject of another series, a parallel series, which takes place in the same time zone as Shadeward, but is separate. It's going to be what else happened, and what is the structure of civilization out in space, in that time zone, and what, if any, interest do those people have in the world of Shadeward potentially. So all those sort of questions need to be answered. Now, I haven't worked it all out yet. That's for the future, but I can see there probably another 4-book series about that environment. So it'll be in the Shadeward universe, but it won't be about the planet Azuria, which is where we've been talking about this evening. So that's for the future. So I think that's going to be fun. And the Shadeward universe is quite, now after all these years, quite well researched. I've done lots of homework in it, so I know what's kind of going on, and I can build that out. The other question that isn't answered is, okay, well, why did we leave the Earth in the first place? What forced us away from Earth? What's that story? I've got that one sort of penned out in outline as well. So I think that's maybe that could be a single book. Or it could again be a series of stuff as well. I haven't quite decided, but I'm going to work on the space side of things, because I think, given the reception that my elite books had, that there's a political elite-esque spaceshipy type story set out in the Shadeward universe, I think is going to have quite a lot of appeal. So I'm quite keen to go work on that too. And that's that stuff that's work in progress at the moment. I'm trying to figure out what that's going to look like, because that's going to be quite interesting. There's also another one which I'm quite interested to do, which is all about the ship that is in the Shadeward series, the Mobilis, as I've already talked about. Where did that come from, and what previous adventures did that have? So that's another, potentially a single book that I could do set on Azuria, but in a different time zone to the events that we've talked about in there. So all sorts of possibilities. I've built this universe, and now I can flesh it out with all sorts of different stories. So I've got hopefully got plenty of time on my hands to ultimately do that. So that's for the future. But right now, Shadeward is done. I think justly proud of it. So all the books are now out. Okay, so if you want, I think probably most of you watching this will have already read them, but or been involved in them, or have read them before. So thank you very much for coming along and enjoying my story. I really do, by the way, appreciate the reviews that people give me, because at the end of the day, the only reason you really write a story is for somebody to read it. I would probably write these stories anyway, but the fact that I get emails and reviews from people saying, like Jason mentioned earlier on, Kiri's caused me all sorts of angst. I was like, yes, I'm kind of pleased about that, because if there's a character in a book who makes you think, no spoilers over the content, but I can certainly tell you the reaction that some of the people have had to the 4th book. There have been a lot of people moved to tears by the events of the last book, and I'm proud that the characters that I've created have moved people to genuine emotions. And I've sort of accidentally done that in the past. I mean, most of you will be aware of what happened to Salome from my Elite stories. You know, she was assassinated in game, and that caused a very, very strong emotional reaction. And it's made me much more aware of the power of literature, and you know what happens to the characters in Shadeward will and has brought people to tears, which means it's a very compelling story, and it's a story that has hit people, you know, at a core level. While still being entertaining and still being exciting and, you know, adventuresome as well. So all of those things are there. So, you know, slight warning for you: if you don't like your emotions being tweaked, you may need to tread carefully. But that's what I like to do as a writer. You know, I like to create characters who people are going to go, "Oh my God, is that what? Yeah, why is she doing that? Is that? Why has that happened?" Or she's not going to. Oh, she did. You know, all those sort of things. So all of those things are, elements I put in. I want the science foundation. I want the believability. I want the wonder of strange new vistas and strange new worlds and all that sort of stuff. But I also do want characters who are very gritty and real and do stuff that you can kind of go, yeah, I can see them doing that. That kind of makes sense to me. So, had a lot of fun. And it's actually with great sadness. I mean, looking at these guys on the screen, I feel strangely like I miss them, because I know I'm not going to write them again, and that job is done as a writer. I finished the Shadeward Saga. So, you know, Kiri's story, Meru's story, Zoella's story is at an end from my perspective. If you haven't read the books, then you know you've still got that to look forward to. But from my perspective, these characters are, I've ended their stories, and I've got to say goodbye to them. In the same way that I had to say goodbye to Salome in the Elite world, because the story is at an end, which is slightly, you know, I'm not sure it's sad is quite the word. It's a bit poignant. That's probably the best word, because you know when you're writing these characters, you have to really be in their heads a lot, and that I think does something slightly odd to your writer's brain. It makes you think they're real. And you almost go through a process of having to let them go as people, even though they don't exist. It's a very strange thing, and readers, I think, will sometimes get that, is that you get so involved with literary characters that you almost consider them real, and then when they're gone and you've lost them because of whatever reason, or they've just come to the end of their stories, then you feel like there's something missing in my life almost. It's weird. It is weird. But you know, there will be more characters. I've already started working on those in my Higara and the prequel stuff. There's all sorts of bits and stuff. So you know, it's all good fun. So Shadeward is out there. The only bits I haven't finished yet are the Audible versions. Now, the first book, Shadeward Emanation, is available on Audible. That one's out. If you like your Audible books rather than actual books that you read, that's absolutely fine. So I'm trying to get those sorted out. Exoneration is done and has been sitting in Audible's tick box thing to be published since April. We are still waiting for Amazon to do its due and press the right button, then it should appear. Enervation, this one, the third book, has been recorded. Basically my next job there is to edit it up so it can be submitted to Amazon, and then once I've done all that, then I will start recording the final one, and getting that prepped for Audible as well. So everything will ultimately be in ebook and paperback and in Audible, but it's just time to do it. Okay, it is coming. The thing is, I'm doing the Audible. So I mean, if you've been listening tonight, obviously you can put up with my voice. So I have recorded the entirety of Shadeward so far, and I will do the last book as well, which, you know, I've got hopefully a reasonable voice, and I've got the microphone here for doing the thing, and I can act it out as, you know, I'm not a voice actor by any stretch of imagination, but I can read a book out reasonably dramatic. And thank you very much, Big Boo. I appreciate that. So the first book sounds great, and there are a few little special effects in it. It's a unabridged read through. No, it's not a dramatization of the story. It's just a read through of the book. So it only has very, very minor special effects in it. So yeah, so the first book is out on Audible. Second book is literally imminently out on Audible. The third book is recorded. I've got to edit it, then it will be out. And the fourth book is yet to be recorded. But certainly by the end of the year, I intend to have the entirety in ebook, paperback, and in Audible as well. So That's the plan. So that is Shadeward. So I thank you very much for listening. I hope you kind of enjoyed the stream in terms of what I attempted to set out the genesis behind the project and where I've ended up with the thing. Thank you for those of you who have read it and supported me along the way. So the first book was out 5 years ago now. And a lot of you have followed it through, very patiently waiting, I must admit, for book 3 and 4, which were delayed by a second delete book. So Premonition happened in between books 2 and 3, which obviously totally threw off the timescales for the third book, for which I apologise, but there's nothing I can do about it. But I have finally finished. I've finally finished the entire series and book, and as many of you know, book 3 ends up on a real proper cliffhanger. So for those of you coming to it now, you'll be relieved that you can go straight on to book 4, because I'm pretty sure that Big Boo was one of the ones who just got to the end of book 3 and went, no. I can't leave us there. So for those of you coming straight into the series now, with all the books complete, you don't have the agonising 1 year wait for the cliffhanger to be resolved while I was finishing writing the book, because they're all there now. So that is probably a good thing. So all the other stuff is I will have to I will crack on. My current project is a fantasy novel called Doomdark's Revenge, which is based on a 1984 ZX Spectrum game, which I will have finished before too long. I've got to get on with that as well. So that I will finish that one before I start on Higara. There's plenty more to do in the world of Shadeward, and I think looking at the way things are working out for me in terms of my writing, is that the Shadeward Universe will probably be the focus of the rest of my literary output for the foreseeable future. I think I've got enough space in that universe that I've created there, the Shadeward Universe, set maybe a few thousand years in our future. It's probably around the year 4000 by the time we get to where we are. It'll keep me occupied until I probably can't write anymore. I can see at least another 8 books, and at my current rate, that's 2 books a year is probably the maximum. So it'll keep me going. There's enough space in space, exactly right. So to keep me going there. So if you want to grab copies of my books, the easiest place is just go to your local Amazon. I can show you how easy that is. Here we go. Fire up your browser. There you go. Go to Amazon. They're available in most of the. Oh look, there it is. If you literally just type Drew Wagar, you'll find them there. You can see them in order. You can see my elite books as well. They've been well received. Shadeward is there. There's Lords of Midnight, the sequel for which I'm working on, and I will give a plug to our anthology as well, 9 Streams of Consciousness, which is a short story. One that many of the people on this stream tonight will be aware of because they contributed to it. So. That's all good stuff as well. So all my books can easily be found on Amazon. If you're an ebook type person, nice and easy. If you're a paperback type person, they're all available in paperback as well. And they are coming on Audible. So let me just double check that it hasn't appeared, because I don't think it has. No. So the first one is available on audio. The second one will be coming soon. However, if that's a good question actually, Tyrants. If you don't like the Kindle, I must admit I like my Kindle, but if you've got another ebook reader and you don't want to kind of be in the Amazon, conglomerate, if you go to fantasticbookstore.com, this is my publisher's own website, and if you look me up, I'm down here somewhere, Drew Wagar, there we go. There I am. You can get all my books from there as well. That's a very young picture of me. It needs to be updated. You can buy them DRM free in ebook formats there as well. So Fantastic Books Store, and then look me up. You can find all my books are there as well. They're all there. Actually, that needs to be updated because it's launching today. And you can get them in the DRM free ebook format, so EPUB and many of the others like that for different types of ebook reader. So if you want to get those copies there, you can, and you can buy paperbacks. He does occasionally have some hardback ones that are special ones as well. Of course, what I would normally be doing around about this time of year is going to all the different conventions, so the science fiction conventions, elite and otherwise, certainly around in the UK. and meeting people who've read the books and want to chat and say hello and sign books and things. Unfortunately, because of the virus, I can't be doing that this year, which is a real shame. But we'll come back next year and there'll be more books, so you'll be able to get them signed there if you so wish. And I love seeing people in person and talking to them about the sort of stuff. So hopefully that's given, for those of you who don't know about Shadeward, that's given you a flavour as to what it actually is. For those of you who do, now you know a little bit more about the inspirations and the background to it. And as you can see on screen, I've got hopefully some memorable characters which will cause you to think and kind of wonder and all those kind of things, which hopefully is the purpose of a book. Have I been to Elfia in the Netherlands? No, I haven't. International stuff is something I haven't even started on. I've only recently been getting to grips with conventions in the UK. I do need to add some foreign conventions to my list as well. So recommendations are gratefully received, actually. So feel free to ping me on Twitter or Facebook or any of those other places you can grab me. All my links are up here. So at Drew Wagar on Twitter, Drew Wagar Writer on Facebook. I've got a YouTube channel at Drew Wagar as well, so there's lots of ways to find me. My own website, actually, if you do want to get in contact with me, there's a contact page there, which is www.drewwagar.com. Not surprisingly, it's nice and easy to remember. So they're all there, and boom, Shadeward Saga. You can contact me through there. Will books be translated into other language? That's a very good question. Not at the moment is the answer. We need, in order to do separate languages, we need a willing publisher in the language area. So I need a German publisher for German, an Italian one for Italian, etc., etc., etc. That would mean, a publisher investing quite a lot of money in the translation. Unfortunately, those things are not cheap, meaning that they would have to put a lot of upfront cost and then recoup that through sales of the book. So it's finding a publisher who's willing to do that, and then obviously to do the necessary marketing in those countries. So I haven't personally got time to manage that at the moment. But if you know a publisher who might be interested in taking that on, I can certainly talk to them and see what the art of the possible is. So, but unfortunately, translation is not a cheap thing. It's very expensive. Which is a real shame, and I can't actually write in any other language other than English, I'm afraid. So that sort of limits me in those sort of spaces. So yeah, it's a difficult one, but a good question. Thank you, Spooky, for that. And there we go. So that is it. So thank you for popping along. I hope you found Shadeward interesting. If you haven't read it, I hope that maybe has encouraged you to read it. I think you'll enjoy it. If you like science fiction, strong characters, adventure, technological, post-apocalyptic, all that sort of stuff. It's a genre-defying series of books. It's adventure, it's drama, it's romance, it's love, and it's technology, and it's mystery, and it's intrigue, and it's science, lots and lots of science in there as well. If that mix of things appeals to you, then that's what Shadeward is. Sort of inspired by a bit of Jules Verne and McCaffrey, a bit of Arthur C. Clarke, Asimov, all of those sort of things. So those are the elements that have been put into that sort of story. So I hope you'll find that quite compelling. That's what it's all about. And I'm just really pleased. Thank you very much for all turning up and watching the stream. Betrayal's in there as well. Yes, there's quite a lot of betrayal and angst and hatred and all sorts of other stuff in there. And flying reptiles appear every so often as well. So there's all sorts of weird and wonderful creatures that live on this planet as well, which I haven't even touched on. And some of the plants are quite interesting as well. They don't just stay put and be. Some of the plants have not quite minds of their own, but they do stuff as well. So thank you very much for turning up to stream. I hope you found that interesting. Books are on sale now, so and do have a read of some of the reviews on them as well, to give you a flavour of what other people have thought about them, because what other people say about books is important as well. So there we go. So I'm back on Thursday when we set off for our Elite Dangerous expedition to the Fomalhaut Rift, so that's going to be quite good fun. We've got a 6-week expedition planned out there. Friday I generally chill out and play a little bit of Stellaris, not Stellarium, Stellaris. Try and get those things. And on Saturday I continue with my retro themed ZX Spectrum playthrough, as it is at the moment, which is kind of all 8-bit games of yore from the 80s, so that's all quite good fun as well. So there we go. Thank you very much. Thank you for those of you who've already read and reviewed my books. Really, really appreciate it. For those of you who are intending to go and buy a copy today, I hope you really, really enjoy it. I write these stories because there's something in me that needs to tell the stories, but to have people read them and go, "Yep, that was fabulous." It transported me away for a few hours, and I love reading it, and I love the characters, and it made me cry. All those sort of things. Is to me is a wonderful sense of brilliant. Thank you very much. It really edifies me, I suppose is the right word. So and there'll be more to come. There's more coming as well. So I will be working on Wall Street. So there's lots more books to come in the foreseeable future. So again, thank you very much. You guys take absolute care of yourself. Have a fantastic week, and I will see you anon. So if you're a regular on my stream, thank you very much, and I will see you on the next one. You be good. Thank you very much for your company tonight. Take care, and I will see you soon. Bye bye now.